You know, there's this scene that has stuck in my brain for a long time. A single scene that pops in my head randomly when I'm least expecting it. In Ubisoft's 2016 action game meets sitcom hacker adventure, Watch Dogs 2. A little context first. Marcus Holloway is the newest member of the hacktivist group DedSec, a movement dedicated to loosening the iron grip big tech has over the world, Marcus being a primary victim of this corporate surveillance nightmare. The thing about them though, is DedSec doesn't have the computing power necessary to truly attack these monolithic companies and needs to build their reputation so they can gain more followers, people who willingly give up their devices to be used as extra processing power. This is done via a sequence of silly, over-the-top stunts like messing with movie studios and referencing the real-life conflict between Anonymous and the Church of Scientology. After a sequence of successful stunts, the light sitcom mood drops as they realize a sizable portion of their followers are from one place. One computer, their bots. Locating them brings Marcus into the headquarters of the social media giant Invite, where it's revealed that it was all the doing of the main villain, who has basically undone all of DedSec's progress. This is the scene. Specifically, as tensions rise and Marcus punches Dushan to the floor and says,
"You can't see the people you're stepping on."
This is the moment the game uses to really spell out the main ideas and ideology of DedSec. As Dushan says, the people don't care how the system works, just that it does. That they feel safer, more secure, that the advertisements they receive are more relevant. That things just work. That a few casualties of the system, like Marcus, don't really matter if overall life is improved. That's kinda interesting, right? Is it what Watch Dogs 2 is about? No. The game has its opinion already, that this is all bad. This is just bad at every level because simply, the system doesn't work. Life is not better, in fact, it isn't meaningfully different. It feels less involved, less oppressive than its predecessor, despite this supposedly being a more advanced version of CTOS. Maybe that's the point? Maybe the fact that the profiler and everything surrounding CTOS is wrapped up in this safe corporate aesthetic, that it's supposed to be hidden in plain sight, unlike the cyber-themed Parasite of Chicago. It's friendly. It's the hyper-surveillance equivalent of putting a fun slide in a corporate office. The sharp edge hidden under a toothless exterior. It's why the profiler boils human emotion down into silly, simple emojis, complex thoughts and ideas expressed through a safe, corporate-approved image. No, it's not about that either. Is it about how a system like this can be used to further social injustice? A tech like this placed into the hands of modern American society would be an absolute nightmare for minority groups. Sometimes, briefly, in between. Instead, Watch Dogs 2 is mostly about doing a sick backflip and whispering sweet anti-capitalist nothings into your ear so you can pretend you're playing something with a point. Now you might be saying, Kai, that's really harsh on the silly hacking game, can you explain more? Well, let's look at that scene again. Because, well, to put it lightly, DedSec? DedSec can't see the people they're stepping on. I could make a really lame criticism here, couldn't I? The most obvious one. That after this speech I could walk out, go grab a coffee, and then dome the worker behind the counter in the skull with a loaded 45. That sucks though, doesn't it? Like, hee hee, ludonarrative dissonance, am I right? Can you feel the faux intellectualism? No, this is a more fundamental problem. Even if you never pick up a gun, only use the game's non-lethal weapons. Is it not stepping on the little guy to whip an 8-ball across the face of someone just doing their job? The security guards are in the way of DedSec's goals, so they get to have a concussion simply for being employed at a bad time. Let's say you don't hit anyone. It's possible, I think. Well, other things the game encourages includes taking money out of the bank accounts of random pedestrians. Sure man, it's only one of the most expensive places to live. They could lose a few bucks, you can buy a shirt with a dog on it. There's even a perk that highlights bank accounts to steal from. Awesome. You can forge evidence and SWAT people for fun, I guess? You can use it to take down targets by getting them arrested. The issue is this usually ends in bodies if the target has backup. Awesome. There's also stealing random people's cars. Sorry, we know this will set you back God knows how much money, but that's not stepping on you. That's what the bad guys do. We peer into the lives of random people because it's useful to us, unlike those assholes who spy on people because it's useful to them, and rig the system to frame people as threats and link them to crimes they never did. Oh, but I know what you might be thinking. Guy, this is just an extension of the shooting the coffee shop guy argument. Ah, poor guy. I'm so sorry. He owned a metal detector. When you play an action game, even one about good people, you have to accept that within the story, concussing a 9-to-5er with a metal ball and string is just acceptable. Because otherwise it would be a walking sim where sometimes you look through cameras. This is true. Kinda. I do think game stories and game, well, play should be in harmony with each other, but I can look past it. No, Watch Dogs 2 has an even more fundamental issue. And this is seen clearly when the most horrific situation imaginable is brought up and nothing happens. The scariest and most sickening thing ever is discarded as quickly as it's brought up. I'm talking about Haum. Haum is an in-universe tech company that focuses on home security, creating the home of tomorrow through, of course, surveillance. It's the classic trade-off: more security, less privacy. But it is all algorithms. It's the only comfort we get in the modern world. That sure, everything is being tracked, but the only thing sifting through it is a computer. I'm sure you can see where this is going. After proving that Haum 2.0 isn't actually as bulletproof as the CEO would have you believe, and embarrassing him on TV, we get an email that one of the higher-ups at the company might be a bit of a bad guy, let's say. So we investigate, head to his home and hack in, and learn one of the most disturbing things I've seen in a game, at least a AAA game. This higher-up is using his access to home software to spy on children and sell that to the highest bidder.
Prices are going up, Chris. This is exclusive material I'm providing. One customer, one kid.
I don't know, man. You're not the only dealer in town anymore.
This is primo. Oh, hold on, Chris.
Honey, put on your pajamas and brush your teeth, please.
What is it?
Something's coming that you're really gonna like, Chris.
We know from the intro that toys are hooked up to CTOS and spy on children. This sick individual is in your home making child abuse material, and he's able to, just because you bought your child a toy. What happens? Nothing. Nothing at all. You expose him off screen, I guess, but nothing actually happens. The next mission? The CEO of Haum was really mean and self-entitled at the gym today and took this guy's treadmill. Let's make him fall down and record it. Oh, there's my silly hacker sitcom. I was worried you were nearly about something. This scene is genuinely just vile and thought-provoking, and that's it. It's done. As for Watch Dogs 2's social commentary, it's, oh boy. Let's talk about $911. Maybe it's pronounced $911, I don't fucking... These missions have a very interesting premise. One of the DedSec members, Josh, notices some strange inconsistencies with CTOS, with poor, mostly racial minority neighborhoods in the city of Oakland having been flagged as highly dangerous, including school zones. This is about systemic racism, police brutality and corruption, and how CTOS exacerbates it. Pretty good idea, right? Well, how does it play out? Mostly by planning ambushes, using CTOS footage to get an idea of how corrupt police deals play out, and planning accordingly. Okay, so we're ambushing the cops, right? No, not really. We're attacking the gangs, the people who are directly affected by the system. We know that the Oakland PD are coercing these people into crime. If these people don't follow along with the corrupt cops' wishes, they'll be flagged as a shoot-on-sight threat and killed. These are the people that we beat the shit out of. Sure, the end is good. A huge amount of corruption and police brutality was exposed and stopped, but the amount of Black and Latino people that had to be stepped on to get there is absurd. People we know were forced into this life by the system. By the time we actually deal with the cops head on, the story has shifted focus. It's way more about the spectacle and ooh, landmark thing that Ubisoft is going on. Marcus has to break in and out of a heavily guarded Alcatraz because, like, isn't that cool? That'll be a fun story to tell. You're right, Wrench. So about all that racism, this is Watch Dogs 2 at its most blatant. $911 also features Miranda Kame, a councilwoman for the city of Oakland who is transgender, but played by a cisgender man. There's talks of videos of her surgeries being leaked to discredit her, but that's it. It starts and ends there. No mention of how difficult it must be to be such a visible trans woman in politics, or how a surveillance nightmare like CTOS could make life so much worse for transgender people. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Just a throwaway line. There is one more story to talk about in this game. It's one so subtle in how it slaps you in the face, one so short and simple, yet it discredits everything our protagonist supposedly stands for. An intersection of poorly thought out characterization and Marvel movie tier connected universe cameo brain rot. I'm talking about Shadows. Marcus heads to the Tenderloin in San Francisco to meet with a DedSec informant, who warns him about the shady dealings with gangs in the area. Skeptical at first, Marcus says DedSec doesn't really care about drug deals or whatever, until it turns out it might be human trafficking. Investigating further, we find a scene out of a horror film, with a huge puddle of blood smeared across the floor next to some shipping containers. Inside, bodies piled on top of each other. It was the work of one person. All of this death and carnage, and Marcus has to save that person. So he does. Heads out, hacks in, and saves this guy. And then brags about it afterwards like he just teamed up with the coolest guy ever. To understand why this scene truly proves this game is about nothing, we're gonna need a little bit of context. Okay, video essay whiplash warning. You know exactly what I'm talking about when I say that. So just get ready for some weapons grade whiplash. Heavily simplified history coming up. After previous failed attempts at revolution, it finally seemed like Ireland could truly be free of the British after the War of Independence. As they were trying to establish themselves as a proper country, there were disastrous talks with the British government, where notably, then President of Ireland, Eamon de Valera, didn't attend. These talks would lead to the highly contentious Anglo-Irish Treaty of 1921, a treaty that would lead to the harrowing Irish Civil War, and of course, the partition of Ireland into two states. The one of note for now being Northern Ireland, a country with a deep history of discrimination and sectarian violence, which in the 60s, inspired by the American civil rights movement, Northern Ireland would get its own, which of course was met with extreme hostility and police brutality, kick-starting the Troubles, a war that lasted 30 years and killed thousands and injured tens of thousands. And it's right here, in the middle of this conflict, that whiplash warning, one Aidan Pierce was born. Raised in a family with an abusive, possibly criminal father, it's hard to know how long he lived in the north before his mother fled to America, like so many others on this island used to. But even his younger sister has vivid memories of her father, which means they spent a chunk of their life with him, surrounded by paramilitary guerrilla urban warfare and crime, with Aidan following his father and becoming a criminal himself, and eventually a terrorist. This video may be about games that don't say anything, that pretend to have a point. I don't think Ubisoft's 2014 crime thriller Watch Dogs is one of those games. But I do think it's important to understand why Watch Dogs 2 isn't about anything, but also it interacts with this topic in a really fascinating way, because Watch Dogs was dismissed. Because of corporate lies, because of inaccurate expectations, and a fundamental misunderstanding with what it's about. While Watch Dogs 2 is a game that looks like it has something to say but doesn't, Watch Dogs 1 was a game dismissed as nothing, but actually may have something under the surface, with Aidan Pierce being maybe one of the most misunderstood characters in video game history, and it's part of the reason why he's so fascinating to me. I gave this little background for a reason, other than, you know, having studied Irish history and looking for any excuse to actually use that, but also because I'm going to say a lot of negative things about this character, but I'm not going to deny his urban warfare skills. And I think his background is important to understand that whatever I say next isn't contradictory, that despite his clear prowess, he is still a lame, pathetic, and evil man. Part 2. The Fox. Watch Dogs' two major protagonists can be mapped pretty cleanly onto comic book archetypes. Aidan is gruff and brooding, violent, a man who uses one bad thing that happened to him to justify his revenge-fueled rampage, a man who uses a supposedly strong sense of morality and justice to hurt people. He's an unbelievable narcissist, thinking he's above everyone, smarter than them. He's perfectly fine using others as tools, as stepping stones. He believes his own hype, thinks he's a master of manipulation. We can directly see that and see it not working. He clearly views himself through this idealized, almost fictionalized lens, where he is the vigilante hero, his alternate identity, as the Fox. People wrongfully assumed that Watch Dogs 1 was going to be a game about hyper-surveillance. It was going to be about big tech. Even people I respect, like Noah Caldwell-Gervais, seemed to think this a little, and considered it a failing when the game wasn't that. Watch Dogs is a game that just so happens to be set in a world on the brink of a cyberpunk dystopia, and that is for one reason. Other than for cool hacker shit or whatever, it's also for this one thing. The setting of Watch Dogs allows for a character like Aiden to exist, because it gives this clearly delusional man his justification. It gives this guy who models himself on the fictional idea of a hero his superpower. The ability to control the city and the people within it. Aiden doesn't care. He doesn't give a shit about the surveillance. He likes it, because without it, he's just another gunman. With it, he's a superhero, the Fox. As a result, Aiden does not exist in a comic book-like world. He doesn't have any supervillains asterisk. He wasn't spawned from falling in acid or getting bitten by a radioactive white mass shooter. He has to deal with real criminals, gangs, and of course, the consequences of his actions. One thing that some people missed about Watch Dogs is that they assumed Aiden being terrible was a mistake, that Ubisoft were trying to craft their own Batman. This is not the case. If you're like me and rooting against Aiden for most of your playthrough, that's not a bug, it's a feature. He was modelled after characters like Walter White and Dexter. However, Aiden's evil is hidden just that little bit better under the language and iconography of superheroes. As Aiden views himself as the only person capable of cleaning up Chicago's filth, he spends much of the game monologuing his justifications to you. Just to add on to how lame he is, these monologues all use his Batman voice, which we know is fake, and not what he actually sounds like, meaning he has fully let the Fox persona corrupt him. I have seen people get this part right and still conclude that we're ultimately supposed to side with Aiden, which is frankly ridiculous. The bad things that happened to Aiden are his fault. We're not supposed to see them as justifications for his actions, but instead reasons to stop. Reasons he ignores. It's only after traumatizing the people he loves most that he gets any second thoughts about what he does. And by the end of the story, those people have all abandoned him or died, leaving him to feel refreshed, alive, and entirely convinced by his perverted view of justice. Seen through the most terrifying ending monologue I have ever seen in an action game. One of the most blatant and obvious ways to signal to anyone skeptical that Aiden is not a failed attempt at a hero, but a purposefully disgusting man, is with the Rossi-Fremont. One of the most misinterpreted features of the original Watch Dogs is reputation. People have wrongfully assumed that reputation is a morality system like Karma in Fallout or Honor in Red Dead Redemption 2. This is because gamer boys have mush for brains, and think because they also agree that killing innocent people is bad, that the reputation system is supposed to align with their morals, and any time it doesn't is a failing. People see the often strange aspects of it as a mistake. They aren't. This is not a game about redemption. It is not a game where you get to choose to be a hero or a villain. It's about a pretty cut and dry violent murderer, and all reputation shows is how willing the broader public are to accept him. There's a reason that preventing a crime is a failed state, but attacking the criminal after they've visibly started their crime is the win state. Because it's all about Aiden being liked. Because the more liked he is, the more people have bought into demented vigilante ideology. The less likely they are to call the police on him. Even if preventing is objectively better, it doesn't matter. Reputation isn't about what is good. That's the reason why if you so much as injure, not kill, injure a corrupt police officer, even in missions dedicated to how corrupt they are, you lose reputation. Because the American public, especially over 10 years ago when the game is set, love cops. It's no surprise to me that high reputation Aiden has support even within the Chicago Police Department, when you remember all the shitheads plastering thin blue line Punisher iconography on their cars in person. Police officers glorifying brutal vigilante violence isn't new, especially when that violence is against a very specific kind of person. There's a reason I titled this part Rossi-Fremont. Inspired by the real-life Cabrini Green in Chicago, the Rossi-Fremont is a now abandoned public housing project that, like the real-life one, had major issues with crime. The Rossi-Fremont was taken over by a gang known as the Viceroys. Now I'm not going to sit here and pretend the Viceroys don't do terrible shit, they absolutely do. But there is nuance to it, because you can't blame everyone for their leader, Iraq, also known as Delford Wade. You simply can't. The Viceroys took over that area. Presumably you either join or you're at risk, and these people are the ones that Aiden has to kill. One could argue that the attack on Rossi-Fremont was just because he needed to save his sister, who's been kidnapped. that his hand was forced, that his sister wouldn't be handed back to him unless he got the data from inside the building, and that he even tried to do it peacefully until it failed. Sure, he got to that peaceful point by manipulating and threatening a 19-year-old and killing other members, but it still was all just to save his own skin, not a desire to prevent death, because Aiden does not see the Viceroys as people, just scum. Bugs to be swatted. He launches attacks on the Viceroys outside of the Rossi-Fremont too, and it's here we get the most naked display of Aiden's vile vigilante beliefs. As some of these Viceroy members, well, they can be as young as 15, and they're slaughtered all the same. Aiden is handed the tools used to further racial injustice, and instead of fighting it, just uses them. Seeing the people he's about to kill, he does it anyway. Children, forced into crime by their circumstances, either from poverty or under direct threat, are seen as nothing more than dirt that needs to be cleaned. Aiden is a much more real evil than an over-the-top character like, say, Trevor Phillips. While Aiden himself could never exist, there will never be a man who can hack city infrastructure to instantly blow up the road and stop anyone chasing him, but the intimate and brutal close-quarters combat of Watch Dogs does feel a little too real. His victims aren't unnamed bad guy 400, they all have names, ages, backgrounds, and other humanizing information. Aiden has true victims in a way game protagonists tend not to. Aiden Pierce is a white vigilante shooter, something that America is unfortunately all too familiar with. I don't have enough words to describe the evil of Aiden Pierce. I can tell as I write this that I'm falling slightly short in truly articulating this monster. You don't have to look far to see that if Aiden was real, he'd still be able to build that reputation. Think about even recent cases, like the man who shot climate protesters and was even praised by many, partly due to just how cool he looked in these glorifying photographs. Aiden in universe is the name edgelords would etch into school bathrooms. He has radicalized people, and we can see in his absence that people have tried to take up the mantle of the Fox, feeling that there was no longer anyone to clean up the filth. Another manifestation of dangerous vigilante thinking. Even when his targets are the most despicable people alive, there's something so disturbing about the way he talks.
What did I do? I killed every one of them. What was I thinking? That's not who I am. Is it? Just ruthless killers. And that's how I'll deal with them. This is the part where I'm supposed to say I feel empty, right? I'd be lying to myself. I finally feel awake. Like I can breathe again. And Lena? Nothing can change her death. But maybe I can still do something that'll make a difference. I give, but I can also take away. Haven't you heard? I'm the vigilante. I clean up mess like you.
And fucking this is the man Marcus Holloway is bragging about. Despite being someone who is known to stand up against social injustice and racism, the guy who rallies against those who can't see the people they're stepping on, he still admires this fucking man. You can't even say it's for a DedSec reason, because when DedSec asks just for 30 seconds in the CTOS system, Aiden says no. He's tired of that noise. Marcus wears the fox symbol on his fucking face. A symbol of disturbing, twisted, narcissistic vigilante ideology. A symbol representing the murder of black children. Because Watch Dogs 2, no matter what it says, no matter how it tries to look, is a game about fucking nothing.
Welcome to the intermission. You made it. You did it. What the fuck? Oh my god. That felt weird. This is where we'd like to hang out, just take a break, and kind of really digest, you know, some of the things that we've seen throughout this. This one's been heavy. My videos aren't normally this heavy. Okay, that's kind of not true. They're usually funnier than this, but most of my videos at the very least touch on pretty heavy subject matter to some extent, but this one's been pretty just direct the entire time, so I hope it's been watchable and hasn't just been miserable. Of course, this is where we show off any fan art that we may have gotten recently. Wow, look at that, if there is any. Cool. And I tell you to go follow me on Twitter. So go do that. And of course, join the server. I will be making a little announcement about that in a few seconds, but you'll see. So due to the subject matter of this video, I felt that it was somewhat inappropriate to do the normal silly Patreon ad that I do every video. It's I have a themed ad to the video that advertises my Patreon and the server. I don't feel comfortable doing that this time because the subject matter is so serious, and usually these are very funny and silly, and they're where I get to do all my visual gags and little jokes. But I will be releasing the cut ad as part of the Patreon bonus, which now that I think about it sounds slightly strange, but it's just, you know, because people really love them. They're usually quite funny, at least I hope. But I really could not bring myself to do that this time. So I'm deeply sorry, but please join the server. It is a huge amount of fun. If you need to learn more, look at any of my other videos and go to the intermission segment, and it'll have a funny themed ad for the Patreon. I'm, again, sorry to any of the fans of the segment. I know that there's a lot of them, but it felt extremely wrong with the subject matter of this video.
I'm like the healer.
Yeah, you're just like that.
Except that's just a game.
But you know, why does this matter? Watch Dogs 2 is actually great. No, seriously, go play it if you haven't. Not enough people have played it, which is why we have Legion. Thanks guys. It's a genuinely really fun game. I have like, too many hours in it. It's my favourite open world city sandbox by far. It has a great eye for chaos and emergent gameplay. It's so dynamic in the ways you can approach a given problem. It's just really good. Even though I've been shitting on the story, it has great character interactions. Even if they're a little dated in their cultural references, it's still also fun. And that's what games are for. Fun. I think there are infinite correct ways to interpret a piece of art, but there are definite ways to interpret it incorrectly. And the original Watch Dogs is one of those games with a lot of misinterpretations. Right? I've seen many people say that the game is a power fantasy, that the vigilante thinking in the game isn't condemned but encouraged, so the lonely white men playing the game can take out their frustrations by exerting power over fictional undesirables. I think this is wrong, of course. I think the game may even be a little heavy-handed in Pierce's awfulness, but there's other things to take into account. Just as a general thing, Pierce is pretty weak as far as video game heroes go. He's not a tank, and single enemies using low-level weapons can pose a big threat. That's not the most concrete rebuttal, I understand, but it is something to keep in mind that many other fictional protagonists are far better power fantasies. You really have to learn the game like I have to pull off a lot of the cooler shit I may have been showing. On a broader level, of course, I have always viewed the game as condemning him at every level. The way he scars his family and gets people he cares about killed, which is entirely his fault. The people around him constantly trying to reason with him. The fact that the final act of the game is literally called "Sometimes You Still Lose," and then Pierce wins, is pretty clear to me. Especially after he delivers that fucking speech. The game clearly condemns his actions. It's not a power fantasy. It's not a bad game. He's not a bad protagonist. He's actually fascinating, and maybe you're noticing a theme here. Watch Dogs isn't bad because I like it. No, it has to be deep. It has to satirize a dangerous ideology, not endorse it. This game that already never got the fair shake it deserved because of higher-ups meddling and marketers lying. A game written and developed by people who wanted to tell a story but were working under an awful company. That's Watch Dogs. Not a regular hidden gem, but a gem hidden in plain sight. Clear as day. Cyberpunk got its second chance, but not Watch Dogs? What do I need to justify this to you? Why do I need you to like this game with me? What do I have to prove? Well, for one, that I'm good. That I like good art. That I'm like these people that I look up to and want to be compared to. Of course, I'm not that. I'm a complete fucking moron. I'm not well educated. I barely read anymore. All these other people are playing these interesting, unique games with well-executed metaphors and a point to make, and I'm sitting here trying to convince you that I'm just like them with this fucking AAA third-person shooter open-world crime game. I have a mostly scrapped video about my favorite game, favorite thing ever, Majora's Mask. And as I was writing, I was overwhelmed by my own insecurity, that I was writing absolute nonsense. That in some way I wasn't doing real analysis, but instead justifying my love for this kid's game, instead of just accepting that I love it because it's fun and I played it as a child. That it has to be genius, high art, because otherwise my favorite thing ever is nothing more than a pretty fun game made for children over 20 years ago. The entire time I was writing, I was taken over by this feeling, this single thought. Well, who the fuck am I to be making grand statements about theme and metaphor on an N64 game? I'm just an asshole who studied English with aspirations of one day making money spinning absolute bullshit about things I already like so I can hopefully stop engaging with regular life and its problems like everyone else has to. Because I'm lazy and entirely useless, a waste of time, space and oxygen, my only skill being to convince a small group of people that I'm smarter than I am. Because I make videos about nothing.
A funhouse is a linear sequence of scares. Take it or leave it is the only choice given.
I remember seeing a TikTok or maybe a YouTube short. Oh, that's embarrassing. The point of it was to refute people defending Tears of the Kingdom's story. I was pretty excited. Finally, someone who also appreciates Zelda stories. Someone refuting the ignorant idea that Zelda games never had any. Then they said the worst thing they could have said. They said Tears of the Kingdom's story is bad because it flies in the face of Zelda's lore. And that Zelda always had great lore. And just, what the fuck are you talking about? The internet's fascination with lore has long been my biggest pet peeve. The fact that so many people seem to disregard looking at stories through any lens other than simply, what happened, is just disappointing. I don't know who to blame for this. Is it game theory? Maybe just a little. Or general anti-intellectualism, or I don't know. But I do know that it sucks. And to think Zelda's a series that should be praised for its long-running, well-thought-out lore is fucking ridiculous. Tears of the Kingdom story isn't bad because it doesn't connect with the others, or maybe even retcons things, because that shouldn't bother you. That should never be the point. A Zelda story shouldn't expand your universe knowledge, it should be a retelling. A simple story of a hero taking down a great evil, and from there expand. You could look at Ocarina of Time as just that simple story. Or you could look at it as a story of growing up, forced maturity, heavy responsibility placed on kids, making them grow up fast and lose their childhoods. And that later on, even when trying to heal that inner child, it's a bit too late. You can't fix it now that time is lost, you can only move on. Because literally when he is handed his childhood back, he doesn't take it, he continues on as he was, wandering, now alone, and eventually ending up in an even more nightmarish scenario. I don't know if it's a coincidence that Ocarina of Time seems to address how people's fears grow with them. How it starts out with fighting big scary bugs with sticks and slingshots in dark, threatening caves, but also more abstract things, like the loss of a parental figure, saying goodbye to old friends, lost to time and changing life circumstances, sickness and infection, and of course, eventually leaving home. And as Link becomes an adult, the fears do too. He's dealing with monuments to death and spirituality, a tyrannical leader destroying the country he grew up in, and of course, that country's disturbing history of corruption and violence, the terrible crimes it has never paid for. I could go on. I could talk about Majora's Mask, and how parts of it eerily mirror the real world, where even when quite literally staring destruction in the face, a grumpy old man will still shout at the politician that we need to follow our traditions and that everything is fine, despite the warning signs everywhere. I could talk about the GameCube games, Wind Waker dealing with a Zelda game with no destiny, where Link has to become the hero himself in all the various ways that can be interpreted, and so on and so forth. Tears of the Kingdom has none of that. Nothing to chew on, just a sequence of events, sometimes repeated ad nauseum. But I mean, it is a Zelda story, right? Link travels around Hyrule, meets up with the various races, and then does a few dungeons, gets powerful enough, and then takes on Ganondorf, then Ganon. That's it. That's kinda all of them. But it doesn't ever seem to build on it. Its most interesting ideas being over just like that. Immediately reversed. Right? Right? I'm willing to admit that older Zelda games are simply more abstract. It's part of their age, and maybe that allows for a lot more unintended interpretations than these newer, glossier, more polished games. Maybe. But this all started in 2011. Skyward Sword is a game about nothing. Nothing except lore. To me, it is the first game I consider modern Zelda, and one of the traits of modern Zelda is having stories that are just there. Skyward Sword's grand storyline amounts to just some lore, where the character looks directly into the camera and explains to you how the rest of the franchise can exist in one universe, and it's totally fine. Here, buy this book to find out more! It's a game about answers. Here's how the Master Sword was made. This is where Hyrule came from. Who cares that the geography keeps fundamentally changing every single iteration, or that the two GameCube games are directly contradictory to each other? They split the fucking timeline. No, these aren't the same legend being changed by word of mouth or the shift of language. They're just a continuous sequence of events, happening one after the other. But maybe Zelda's never been about anything. And I'm just doing it again. Pretentiously looking into something that was never that deep, because what the fuck do I know? Seriously, who the fuck do I think I am? What, do I have some fucking insight into the developers' minds, that I can somehow see the exact moment Aonuma gave up? No, of course not. I just like these games as a kid, so they have to be brilliant because everything I like is brilliant because I'm super fucking smart. Even though I'm sitting here with a bunch of kids games because I'm too shallow and incurious to play the big smart boy games and just stick to what's comfortable and only what's comfortable, because anything else is just too much fucking work. For a long time now, I've been chasing something. Other people. Other channels. I wanted to be like them. I wanted to be seen in the same light as them, but as I thought about it more, why? Why would I want to be them? They already exist. If I want to experience their work, I can just go do that. Why would I want to be redundant, make redundant art, when I could make something new and unique? Why do I use my insecurities as an excuse not to grow? Where instead of recognizing that, yeah, maybe I don't have the widest media diet or I don't read nearly as much as I used to even a year ago, and changing that, it's just this vicious circle of logic. Where I don't branch out enough because I don't branch out enough. Like it's a fundamental part of who I am. Growing and changing is simultaneously really easy and excruciatingly hard. It may seem trivial to just read some more damn books. That's because it is. It is trivial. But getting over using my weird insecurity is so difficult. But I think recognizing it is the first step. I know that I'll be like this for a long time. Even though I'm in a moment of clarity now, give it a few weeks when I'm writing the next script, and all those thoughts will come crawling back and worm their way into my mind. But hopefully, I'll be a bit more ready for it. Ultimately, the value of art is what it means to you. Our brains all see things differently, and if you see something others don't in a work considered shallow, despite how I act, that doesn't make you dumb. And I know that, and I need to learn to recognize that for myself, and trust that I have something to say. Something worth saying, despite all the insecurities in my head. That's not to say everyone is right, because they're not. And this idea of full death of the author, art is only what you make of it, can go too far, and we do need to recognize when works, even works we love, have aspects to them that may be harmful in a very real way. Many people seem to attach their own morality to things they consume, and that liking something bad makes them bad too, so they will ruthlessly defend the works they love, unwilling to accept their flaws. But maybe that's a topic for another day. I'm definitely not done with this. I will absolutely return to it one day. I love art, I love discussing it, and part of why I started this channel was to hopefully inspire someone one day. I guess the point is, the art that matters to you matters, and that if you're like me, we need to work on our insecurities, and shouldn't dismiss works because of assumptions or others' dismissal, and it's okay to see depth, even when from the surface, it looks like shallow water. And sometimes it's okay to just like something. Again, I fully mean Watch Dogs 2 is a game about nothing, and I still got 200 plus hours in that thing. I've been Kai from Kai's Home for Aspiring Vampires, and squadala, we're off! That was a CDI Zelda reference. Wow. It's the end of the video. Oh. Ooh. Did you enjoy? If you didn't, that's fine, I don't care. Just got really edgy all of a sudden. I've been doing these a lot more. It's kind of like the intermission, but after. Before I just kind of let people stew in the final words, but I've been putting stupid shit at the end of it too often for that to really work anymore. I would just like to thank patrons Hyper Waffles, Gamma Freya, and Sammy 3D for their continued support. Wowee! You guys are the bestest, coolest guys known to goddamn man. Okay, watch this. Watch it. Do it. Come on, you won't. You won't, coward. Watch it, come on. Are you a coward? Scared? Scared of finding something you don't like, huh? Watch it.